and welcome to the Journey to the CEO Success podcast. I'm your co-host, Melissa Saunders, along with Patrick Thean, entrepreneur, CEO coach, and a USA Today and Wall Street Journal best-selling author. His latest book, The Journey to CEO Success, is a #1 Amazon bestseller.
Hey, Melissa, good to see you.
How are you?
Yeah, doing good today.
Awesome. And I am thrilled to announce our next guest. His name is Kevin Eikenberry. He's the Chief Potential Officer, I love that, of the Kevin Eikenberry Group, a leadership and learning company based in Indianapolis. He spent 30 years helping organizations and leaders from over 50 countries become more effective. Global Gurus has him listed on the list of most influential thinkers on leadership for the last 4 years. His blog and podcasts are among the most popular on leadership. He has authored, co-authored, or contributed to, get this, over 20 books. His newest book is called Flexible Leadership: Navigate Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence. He also has his own podcast, the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be here. And so, Patrick, it's returning the favor, right? Because you've been on my show twice.
Yes.
And
yes.
I'm super happy and excited and honored to be with you today.
Welcome to your show. Welcome to our show. And when I was on your podcast, we had a great time. So, our audience on this show, they're CEOs looking to have a more joyful and successfal life.
So all those in favor.
Yeah, exactly. So I love to share a little bit. You to start actually by sharing a little bit about your journey, your personal journey. It'll take about 5 minutes to introduce yourself, how life got you to where you are here, and then after we can talk about your book.
So I was born. We probably don't need to go back quite that far, but no. Actually, my kidhood is an important part of my story. So I grew up on a farm in Michigan, and we had a farm. And as I was growing up, we had a related agricultural business as well. So I had tremendous responsibility that is hard to replicate for most people at an early age. And I had the chance, being that my parents were only 20 years older than me, I had the great opportunity to spend a lot of time with my dad I went with him everywhere, right?
That's
and
wonderful.
So I had the chance to observe folks far my senior. I had the chance to sell to them, interact with them. I had the chance to learn from them, observe them. And so it was a tremendous opportunity, not just from the leadership perspective, but also from the knowing what it means to work hard, how to take care of a customer, and a lot of other things that I had the chance to learn at a very young age. And it certainly has served me, and it's shaped me, I would say, in many ways in my career.
So you said you grew up on a farm. So did you have to wake up super early? What kind of farm was that?
Well, it's interesting because, I am an early morning person, and I never realized this when I was a kid. My dad really wasn't. Now, in retro, it's not like he slept in, but compared to other farmers, he would be the last one to bed, but he wasn't necessarily the first one up. We didn't milk cows. We didn't have that kind of a schedule, but we did have hogs. And so we certainly had those kinds of responsibilities, but not in that traditional classical. Actually, I get up far earlier now than I did.
But on the farm, how early did you guys have to? Kill my myth for me, because
it all depends. Again, there's all this whole thing that we all know about circadian rhythms, right? And different people have sort of different rhythms. And my dad worked as hard as anybody I know, but given the choice between starting at 5 and starting at 6, he'd start at 6. And
that's late for a farm. That's amazing, right? Starting at 6 is
right.
late.
And again, animals play a big part of that, right? So if you that becomes an important piece of that overall puzzle. But I can remember lots of nights when I was in high school that I was still in the field on a tractor with lights on, working, when everyone, trust me, everyone in my class had long been in bed, and then getting up and then going to school the next morning. So certainly worked long hours, although not necessarily in my particular case, not necessarily that super early time. Now, if I farmed, my kids would have had to get up way earlier because I'm a much more of a morning person than my dad was.
Great.
It sounds like your dad and I would get along better because I've always tried to go to sleep earlier and wake up earlier, but my rhythm is just I go to sleep at 1 a.m. I just do, and when I try to go to sleep earlier, I just struggle. So, but I've been trying.
To find our rhythm, right? We have to find that for ourselves.
Yeah.
And I went, so kind of going back to my story, I went to school. I went to study agriculture at Purdue, and I, for a period of time, really expected that that's what I would go back home to do. Some things changed. Did not end up being what happened. Although with my sister and our spouses, I own the farm I grew up on, and it's my favorite place to be in the world. Melissa, you and I were talking about strange hobbies. I could mention one if you want later, but anyway, so I went to work in corporate America, found myself doing training and development there, even though that wasn't my main job. Most people know if you're a CEO anywhere in corporate America, like you things sort of show up, and then you find out that you kind of like them, and maybe people kind of think you're good at it, and then you kind of move in that direction. And that's what happened for me, moving from sales and marketing into training development. And I always wanted to have my own company. And even though it ended up not being in agriculture, during my time at Chevron, I figured out that this is the work that I do now. I mean, it's not exactly what it looked like when I first left Chevron, but fundamentally being in the learning business is what had me leaving Chevron after about 8 years. And I've been doing this for about approaching 32 years now.
Wonderful. Hey, let's talk about your new book. So first, congratulations, Flexible Leadership. Show it to us again, man. Show us to us. Yeah. So congratulations.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks so much.
And I love your title. I love Flexible Leadership. I tell you, I've been giving quite a bit of advice to some of my friends' kids who are finishing university, college now, and getting to the workforce. And I've discovered something. And I've discovered that when I was growing up, I think we were a lot more flexible, frankly. But the folks that I've been talking to, my friends' children, they seem much more like, hey, I've been trained to do this, and I need to find a job that will do this. And I've been counseling quite a few of them to maybe be a lot more flexible. And you're just starting life, man. It's like I'm an electrical engineer, but what I do today, I finished electrical engineering. I went to Oracle. I did software. I didn't do any electrical engineering. I was flexible. So tell us a little bit about your book, Flexible Leadership, and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so that form of flexibility, if you think about Epstein's book called Range, which talks about there's a lot to be said for having breadth rather than simply depth, and I think there's tremendous value there. There's a connection to what we're doing in flexible leadership. So there's certainly like flexibility in terms of what I want to do, what I want to learn, and all that stuff, and being open-minded in that regard is super important. What's happened in leadership, and sometimes whether at the front line all the way up to being a CEO, is that there have been, if you think about it in some ways, it's about 100 years in round numbers that people have really been studying leadership development beyond sort of military, right? Around 100 years. And I'm old enough with enough gray hair that I've been doing it for, maybe a third of that time. And I'm fortunate to know some of the people that I'm standing on the shoulders of some of those people that did some of that earlier work. And everyone in that world has tried to build useful tools, useful models to help leaders get better. And the intention has always been amazing. And the results have been mixed. Right. And so one of the things that's true about human beings is that we are really good at recognizing patterns. And so what we've done is we've tried to build models which are necessarily a simplification of a complex real world. And that's what we've largely done. And so all of us who are all of us here, and certainly everyone who's listening, you've done assessments, right? You've done Big Five, you've done Myers-Briggs, you've done styles, you've done strengths, you've done DISC, you've got numbers and letters and colors and stuff. And we've done all those things, and those models are helpful in simplifying a complex world. But the problem is we then simplify them further. So having a leadership style, or knowing what my strengths are, or knowing that I'm this, that, or the next thing in terms of my Myers-Briggs or my DISC or whatever, is very useful until it's not. And when it's not is when it becomes our identity. And when it becomes our identity, we are no longer flexible. So when I think about being a flexible leader, it's about open-mindedness, of course, but ultimately what it's about is there's a difference between being consistent in our values, our purpose, our principles, and being flexible in our approach. And once we've locked into this is how I lead, we aren't flexible anymore. And so now we're going to keep doing it the way we've always done it. Natural habit patterns, auto responses, all that stuff keeps us from actually flexing. My point is that in a world that's more complex than ever, in a world with more uncertainty than ever, we need to figure out and think about how to flex our approach to leading, rather than leaning into what we've always done or what we think is how we're supposed to do it.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand that well. So for example, if I look at my DISC profile, I'm a high D, dominant leader.
Yes, I would say you are.
Yeah. Why, thank you.
I didn't say that was bad. I just say my observation would match that.
Yeah. So what I think I'm hearing you say is, if you get too locked into saying, look, I'm a high D, I'm a dominant
so this is
leader.
how you've got to
style, right?
Or you have to expect this from me, right?
Yeah.
Right. So what I think I hear you saying is, okay, actually, in some cases, I need to be more of a supportive leader, or a consistent on the other side, or more using my intuitive, the I. So there's the I, S, and the C. Use the other parts to be more flexible and understand that maybe in this situation, working with this person, high dominance just doesn't cut it. Maybe I should cut back on that and not get too stuck into saying, dude, that's just me, right? That's what I'm hearing. Be more open, be more flexible, and understand that there's different ways to lead.
So yes, and I'm going to say yes, and to that. So the first thing is, and we have a DISC assessment that we've been selling for the last, long time, because DISC itself is in the public domain. So there's lots of different versions of it, and they're nothing wrong with any of them. But even in what you said, and we try to coach people really carefully about this, is that rather than saying I'm a high D, I have a lot of D traits. Yes. Right. Because the minute language is slippery. Yes. Right. Language is slippery. Right. So the minute you say I have a lot of D traits. And here's the thing. So we could think about flexing around DISC, and anyone who's listening that knows that would make some sense. But really, the piece that we've got to have in it when we think about being a flexible leader is we have to first, so three parts. First, we have to be intentional, because if we're not intentional, we will go to our natural response. So intentionality first, recognizing that there's more than one way to be successful, right? And then next, we have to recognize the context of the situation. So Patrick, I won't talk about Melissa, but Patrick, you and I have been around long enough to know that
Melissa's a young baby. She's young.
See, I'm staying out. I'm
I'll
staying
let
out of
you
it.
guys say it.
I'm just staying out of it all the way. So here's I'm being flexible. Here's the thing that I would say, that when Patrick and you and I, and when many of you that are listening started your careers, the context of work was far more clear than it is today. Best practices were actually a best practice. That there was natural and known cause and effect, that there were so many things about the context of work that were clearer. Listen, when I was at Chevron back in the day, one of our big focuses as an organization was best practices. And that made a lot of sense in a lot of ways, then makes way less sense now. Because the world is more complicated and complex. We use the Kevin framework in the book from Dave Snowden's work to help people get a sense of that. And so my intention is that I want to get great results, and recognizing that perhaps I need to do something different than my natural inclination. And then I look at the context of a situation, and then that's the cue to say, then how do I need to flex, right? So let's just go back to someone like Patrick, hypothetically, that has high D traits, a lot of D traits, right? There's a time when leaning into your decisiveness, dominance, desire to make quick decisions, there's a time when that's exactly going to serve us, regardless of our style. And for you, in those cases, your natural inclination, awesome.
Be right in.
Not all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Not all the time.
Yes.
And so when we think about, so in the book, we try to help people understand this context. And then we introduce probably the big idea of the book is what we call flexors. And a flexor is to say, so let's just take an example that we'll just sort of stay with people with high D traits, or people with high D or I traits,
Yes.
right? Who are more extroverted.
Mm-hmm.
Right? People with high I and D traits are more extroverted. And for those of you listening, if you don't know DISC, you can still follow what we're saying here. So here's a flexor. I'm talking or I'm listening. And if we take either end of that all of the time, that will not serve us best. Right? The idea of a flexor is it's not about this or that. It's not about customer or employee. Like if we lean into one or the other, that's a flexor. If we lean into one or the other all the way to the end, we will necessarily automatically make mistakes. The right answer is somewhere in the tension between the two, somewhere in the tension between customer and employee, somewhere in the tension or team member, somewhere in the tension between talking and asking. And the right answer, or the most effective answer, is contextual. So what does the situation tell me? So stopping long enough to say, well, what's going to serve me or our outcomes best here? And then going in that direction, even if it's not what we think is our strength, even if it's not what we are most used to or most comfortable with, but what's going to serve outcomes and others, the nature of our work as leaders, best. So it's not a model, it's an option to say, how can I have an approach to leading in this moment that will serve us best?
So do you find, or does your research show you that as we get older, we get more confident, our experience leads us a certain way, and that's when we begin to be less flexible? Is that what you see? So for a person who has a lot of experience, if we want to be more successful, we actually have to be intentional, as you put it, be intentional about remaining flexible in the tension of A and B. Yes,
100%. Right. So like again, as humans, it's wired into us to say, well, this is the pattern. When this happens, this is what this reminds me of. This is what I'm going to do.
Yes.
And the patterns are less clear in a world that's more complex and uncertain. And so should we recognize those things? Yes. Am I suggesting that our past experience isn't valuable? I'm not saying it isn't valuable. I'm saying our past experience and what we're seeing right now. Like the whole point of being a flexible leader is we're no longer thinking about the world as an either or world. I'm either a high D or I'm a high S, which are on the opposite corners of DISC, right? Like, no, like no one's got a 0 on all 4 of those things on anybody's DISC assessment, right? So the point is, where should I lean? Where should I move in the tension between those extremes, in the symbiotic relationship between them to serve me? Should I recognize my experience? Yes. Should I ignore any other cues, clues, or inputs? Not likely.
So what advice do you have so if you look at your book and you look at how I'm trying to help people have a more successful and joyful life, what tips could you give us regarding flexible leadership to have a more successful and joyful life. Like I already discovered one for myself, which is that as I get older and more experienced, I need to be careful not to become more dogmatic. Frankly,
Perfect way to
lots
say
of
it.
beautiful patterns. I need to acknowledge the patterns, but be curious enough to look at the other side as well. And I'm thinking about, that's a tip for myself, frankly, that I got
Yeah.
from you today.
No, I think that's a great way to say it, Patrick. So if we as CEOs want to be more successful, then obviously there's a big question. How do we define success? But as a capital L positional leader, right? As a CEO, at least part of that success is related. Here's a flexor, by the way, is related to getting outcomes. And we only reach valuable outcomes with and through others. So there's a flexor there between outcomes and others.
Yes.
And where you land on that, you might want to think about examining the other end of that tension a little bit more. And I would suggest that when you're able to manage the tension between outcomes and others, the principal role for us as leaders and CEOs, that necessarily we will become more successful pretty much however we want to. If we want to leave a legacy with our folks, that gives us that chance. If we want to change the direction of our business or greater profitability, whatever, like we can work to get both of those things to happen only when we start to see them as symbiotic rather than competing. We could have a long conversation about the competing thing about that and return to office and all that kind of stuff. So, and then on the joyful side, I think that once we have ways to think about leading that serve us even better than what we've gotten up until now, then we will have greater levels of confidence. And I think that healthy confidence is one source of joy for me anyway. And I think probably for others.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's funny? You mentioned this earlier. Like, I have now, so I've learned something today too. I shall say I have high D traits, right? Not I'm a high D. Thank you.
I have a lot of D traits.
I have a lot of D traits. And what's interesting is that you said that people with D traits and I traits tend to be more extroverted. I'm actually more introverted, frankly. And
so what's your secondary style then after D? You remember?
It's just DD. And I'm just joking.
Yeah. Right in the middle.
You should ask Melissa. You should be asking Melissa this question, not you this question. So Melissa, let's talk about Patrick. I'm just
but I'll share with you that I'm a bit of an introvert. And so when I get really, really busy, I don't like to go out there and do stuff. And my wife likes to go out and do stuff. And she asked me to hang out with some new friends a few years ago. And I said no. And she said, why not? I said, babe, I'm just not in the market for friends. I'm not in the market for friends. And so Pei, my wife, insisted that I spend time with this family. And today they're like my closest friends. And I think back to them like, wow, like I was so inflexible, frankly. I was so focused on work and things. I was not flexible. And
wasn't in the market for friends. I love
that. And thanks to my wife who basically insisted, right? She said, I don't really care if you're in the market for friends or not, but you're coming.
Come on.
And one of my closest friends today, and so I just think of like how many opportunities I may have already missed for the joyful part of my life by just not being flexible in thinking like that, right? So is like the tension between the 2 points of, look, I got work to do, but I've got to also I also have to go meet people. And as I get older, I realize that that's more important now. When I was younger, it was less important. So,
and it's interesting because you earlier you said as we get older, don't we get more set in terms of our expertise? Yes. And that's true. And so that can work against the flexibility piece. But if we're self-aware, or we have people in our lives like you do with your wife to help you, to give you another perspective. Fundamentally, when she said you're going, she was helping you get another perspective.
Yes.
Right. And And I think sometimes as we get older, you know, the proverbial we're looking at the world from our rocking chair kind of thing, and we don't have to wait for age to do that. This comes back to intentionality. So if we want to have greater success and joy in our lives as CEOs and in the rest of our lives, I think having more intentionality about whatever it is that we're doing is incredibly important. And when we lock in and when we overly identify, narrowly identify, we are very efficient, right? Because we're letting habit take the lead.
Yeah.
And habit is awesome. Like, we need habit, but like, I think if we're able to step back, I wrote this morning a piece for our newsletter. I was writing about speed bumps, right? And when we see a speed bump, we slow down for good reason. And that gives us a chance to be more observant of our surroundings, which is why the engineers wanted us to slow down. And so we've got to find ways as CEOs with all of the stuff on our list to slow down enough. And if we can slow down enough to be a little bit more intentional, we've got a much better chance of greater success, because it's the counter to speed, right? Fast and slow, by the way, is a flexor, right? Too fast, sometimes a problem. Too slow, sometimes a problem. Where should we be right now? And being intentional about that is another way to help us get greater success, but also to find more joy in our work and the rest of our lives.
Ooh, Kevin, that was awesome. I love the idea of looking at a speed bump as almost a chance to breathe and look at the world around us and be more flexible instead of just kind of getting really perturbed that it's there. It's an interesting way of looking at it.
So Kevin, if you were to jump in a time machine and go back to somewhere in the middle of your career, not all the way to the beginning, but somewhere in the middle of the career where you've already had some experience, what advice would you give your younger self now that you understand all this, this flexible leadership?
Kevin, it's not about you. You need to be a little less self-centered and a little more other-focused. And I was good at that in some situations, but not in enough situations.
That was
good. That's deep.
That
Not
is
about
deep.
yourself. Not about you, buddy. Got that.
It's not. Yeah. Listen, as a CEO, like there are trappings, there are challenges for sure, but there are trappings, and there are interviews, and there are opportunities, and there are all sorts of things that maybe you never even thought would come your way. And yet there's no such thing as a self-made man or woman. And number one, and number two, whatever you've done has gotten you here. But if you want to have greater impact in the future, it's just not about you.
Yeah.
And maybe you've gotten here, and if you look back at the path that's left behind you, you might not even love everything you see. But I'm not saying that from a place of being guilty. I'm saying that from a place of being aware about the choice, because those choices are past. You said put us in a time machine, but we know I don't have a flux capacitor. I can't go back into the time machine, right? So all I can do is, what choices am I going to make now for tomorrow?
Yes. Now, I know Melissa's dying to ask this question, so I'll ask it for her. If you're going on a road trip, what is a snack? What's your favorite snack to take with you on a road trip?
It's always around lunchtime, Kevin. So I get hungry.
So let's be clear that if I'm driving, especially if I'm by myself, like, I have a close friend who drives for a living, and I'm like, Alan, I don't know how you do it, because, man, I would weigh 712 pounds. Because there's something about driving and eating that just goes together.
I know, right?
It is.
So I don't know if I have, like, asking me a favorite is hard in anything, but the first thing that came to my mind, Melissa, is really good black licorice.
Wow.
Licorice.
Black licorice.
And there's just black licorice. That's but here's the thing about really good black licorice is that you can hopefully keep yourself from eating it too fast, so I can really enjoy it, and that's why I'm saying it, because otherwise it's like the Doritos, they're just gonna keep
You pop them in too fast.
Peanuts, they're just gonna keep going. It's better off to have something that maybe I will slow down be a little more intentional with and savor a little bit more. Maybe
Yeah.
that'd be right to my advantage.
So Kevin, it's so much fun to have you on.
I did
this
not know
show.
that question was coming. I had no
know,
idea.
Man,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
It's
That is
so much fun to have you on this show that we're like out of time. However, the last question I always ask every single guest is this one, which is we're trying to help CEOs have a more successful and joyful life. So what final advice would you like to leave with our audience on how to have a more successful and joyful life?
I'm gonna say the speed bump. Like, so here's the thing about the speed bump. If you don't notice it, you have a shock, right? Like if you don't know it's coming, like that's not good. So maybe what we need to do as CEOs is place more speed bumps in our way. Some of us need to spend a little more time listening to our team. Some of us need to spend a little more time reflecting on what's already happened and what I need to know and can learn from that. And some of us need that speed bump to be grateful. There's lots of reasons why that pause is useful to us. I'd say find a way to put more speed bumps in your life.
Great. Kevin, thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
being on the show with us
That
today.
was
You are
amazing.
awesome, buddy. You
It
are awesome.
really was. Thank you for sharing your story. I love the idea about the speed bump. I can't wait to talk to you later about this farm and your hobbies. Sounds like some interesting stories there. But until next time, I'm hoping our audience will go out there and enjoy their journey.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.